So there's nothing like you can buy and forget, because all the examples you hear, okay, somebody bought something 30 years ago and this is where it is, it suffers from survivorship bias. So you're talking only the survivors. I was just giving an example of banks that people say that, oh, if you had bought HDFC Bank or Kotak Mahindra 25 or 30 years ago, this is how you would have done. I said, you've forgotten all the banks which actually went bust. Centurion Bank, Global Trust Bank, Times Bank, Yes Bank went through such a big problem. So many public sector banks went through problems. So always think carefully, look at the full data. I mean, otherwise it is very easy for somebody to come and tell you stories. This is the other thing. We were talking about data. Actually, the thing is that human beings are creatures of the story. I mean, there's one thing which is common across all human civilizations, across time and across level of sophistication, from the person living in a tribe to someone living in New York City. It is stories. As human beings, we respond to stories. We do not respond to statistics. So that's why most ads are stories. If I tell you that in Thane district there are so many lakh malnourished children, you will turn the page. But if I give you the picture or video of a single family who doesn't have enough to eat, you are more likely to contribute to that charity. So that is why we have to guard against stories. Even in your business, I'm sure you will hear stories of the next big thing. So always you have to put the filter and see what the data is. But as far as your personal finance is concerned, even if you don't have to spend like hours every day or every week even, you have to start and get the broad picture right and start as soon as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. All of them very relevant. She speaks about 9 mantras in the book. I'm sure, difficult to remember all 9. But few sort of that stayed with me when I picked up the book and read that was be the house and not the gambler. Which basically means be here for the long term.
No, it's not really that. It is that that always look at the game and how it is played. So, I mean, house and gambler it's a metaphor from the casino business, because the casino always has an edge in every game. So, let's say you are playing roulette. So there are 37 slots, and you can bet on 36 of them. You cannot bet on 0. So every time the wheel is spun, if it lands on 0, which it will 1 out of 37 times, the house gets all the money, nobody wins anything. So in 1 game or 10 games, this will, it may be that the people who have come to play, the players are winning, but over millions of these, the house will always win, because they have this edge. So always, and which is the principle why in the stock market you should have a diversified portfolio. Because even if you toss a coin, if you toss a coin 10 times, you might get 8 heads or 9 heads. But if you toss it 100 times, you are likely to be close to 50 heads. So that is what diversification does. It reduces the element of randomness or luck. It increases the element of skill. So again, this is one of the myths you hear about, that unless you have a very concentrated portfolio of only 15, 20 stocks, you cannot outperform the market. This is wrong, because on the average, at least 40 to 50% of the stocks do better than the index. So that is that you will always, so there are enough stocks available who will outperform. So even if you have 50 stocks out of those hundreds, you're fine. So you don't have to be. Very concentrated portfolio means that you are playing luck. There's one other thing which is often talked about, that invest in only your circle of competence is fine. I mean, as an individual, you might find some things in the consumption, some brand you are consuming which looks good, or some retail chain you see or something like that. But that's only a very limited part of the market. It's fine for you to buy some stocks, but if your professional, whoever is advising you, or your fund manager says that, there is a problem. Because ultimately, circle of competence, that invest in your circle of competence, is a euphemism for comfort zone. If your fund manager understands only 2 or 3 industries, let's say they understand only consumer brands and banks, and they invest only in that, then you are constrained, because themes in the market always change. No industry does well forever, no asset class does well forever, no country does well forever. So whenever that thing changes, and maybe instead of consumer brand, metals start to do better, then what are you going to do? So that's why it is important to diversify, and there are many myths. So that is the reason why I wrote the book, because also I'm an avid reader. I read on the average maybe about 50 books a year. So I find that a lot of non-fiction books, only a few ideas are stretched out. And that's why it's difficult for me to, just talk about what are the main ideas, because there are like 40 odd chapters, and every chapter I have tried to deal with something different, but in very simple language. Again, as I said, because of the teaching genes, my whole thing is that it should be clear to somebody who doesn't have a background in finance. So I'm very happy when people tell me that my 15-year-old son is reading it, or my 75-year-old mother is reading it, who don't have a background in finance, and they're able to follow it. So that was also the purpose. That and as I said, it is that all the things that are talked about in the market, hold it up to light. Does it hold? Does it not hold? Is it true? Is it not true? And also, see, one part is understanding the basic financials, which is relatively not so difficult. The more difficult part is taming your own mind. And which is true not just of investing, that's true of every field of life. We talked a fair bit about all the biases we have as human beings. So any human judgment brings bias A and noise. Noise is what? It is randomness. That today you had a fight with your spouse in the morning, you will look at the same data differently, or a fight in the traffic. Yeah, some of you will be from the same industry. If I give the same data to 10 of you with the same experience in the same industry, you will have different opinions on that. So that is also randomness. So that's why in human judgment always this part comes in, which is why Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize on some of these things, said that ultimately, if you can distill your expertise into a system, the system will make better decisions than the human being. So this again is something, which is across industries, because he's given examples from judiciary to, of course, investing also. Like, for example, the studies found that if you want relief from a judge, let us say you want bail, then don't go before lunch, go after lunch. Because when the judge is hungry, they are more likely to turn down your request. So this is how random human beings are. So that's why data is so important, and being clear that you're sticking to the data is so important.
No, absolutely. I think you spoke about in the book also on no storification, but datafication, right? And that is so relevant for manufacturing leaders also, that a lot of the times decisions on the shop floor are also taken because somebody has been running that machine for many years. It's just called tribal knowledge, that they understand this better than anyone else, right? But have you looked at the data? That I thought is very similar that we have looked at. Beyond that, I think one more mantra that she spoke about was focus on the signal and not the noise. So again, a lot of noise in the financial world and the manufacturing world. But how do you look at picking up signals which are based on data? Very important to look at that. But one more mantra I thought, Devina, you could touch upon is you spoke about rigidity kills, not just the arteries, but also investing.
Yes, I mean, or for that matter, manufacturing also, or any field, that things are changing, and the pace of change is higher now than it has ever been. So even when I talk to young people, I say that be certain that when you start working, you're not going to be doing the same thing for the next 40 years. That model has changed. So now the skill that is required is the ability to learn, relearn, change. That is true again across industries, that you must, that is the key skill that is required, the ability to recognize that things are changing and be able to adapt to that. So that adaptability is becoming more and more important. And of course, AI is bringing another level of acceleration to that, which is of course not to say that AI, I write this fortnightly column for Mint, so my last one was exactly on this, that every time there's a technological change, we think, the disaster is looming for everybody who's employed currently. For example, I remember I was young then, but not so young not to remember that all the bank unions went on strike when there was computerization of banks in the 80s, because that at that time, if you looked at what a banking employee did, almost all those things were getting over time got automated away. That updation of passbook, keeping manual accounts. At that time, even check clearing used to be manual. In fact, that was the first thing that was automated, because that used to create chaos. It would take weeks for a check to clear. Some would get lost and all that. But today, it's not as if the banking industry is employing less people. It is employing more people, because everything from cyber security to ATM to the digital experience of customer, everywhere people are employed. And this has been true everywhere. I mean, right from the time the textile machinery was automated. So every time we think that this is going to, when the printing of books came, that people who used to handwrite manuscripts will go out, but that's never happens. I mean, so you have to adapt, and also normally because all these changes increase productivity, the cost and price of the products and services comes down, so the demand actually explodes. So that's the other end of how these things happen. So, but you have to be ready to adapt, ready to change. And one thing which I just, so I mean, in terms of, I don't know how much time we have left. So one important thing which you can do, which I say is the number one thing you can do as an individual for your own finances, is look at your asset allocation. Now this sounds fancy, but it's pretty simple. So what is asset allocation? It is, and as I say in Google Maps, it is not as if that you only put the destination, you have to put the starting point. So first look at how currently all your finances are, where are you invested, and also categorize it. So one category is equity. So this is both direct equity as well as equity mutual funds. So how much is in that? Second category is what is fixed income. So everything from bank fixed deposits to PPF to fixed income mutual funds. Though fixed income mutual funds, you have to be little careful, because never take credit fixed income mutual funds, because those are high risk. But that's the category. Then things like gold, then real estate, and if you have something in crypto or art or something. So first look at all of that, then look at where you should be. And I even though equity is my main business, I always say, even if you are 25, you should not be 100% in equity ever, because equity, the predictability on a 1-2 year basis is very low. So equity should typically be money you do not need to touch for 8 to 10 years. So everything else that is possible, any loss of job or buying a house, your own studies, your children's studies, if anything is coming up in next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that money should not be in equity, and which is why 100% should never be in equity. But that's the broad thing you have to look, and don't be at extreme ends of the risk spectrum. So I find sometimes people will say that I have been in fixed deposits all my life. I've never even invested in equity. Now, after retirement, I'm thinking to become a full-time day trader or a crypto trader. I mean, I'm not making it up. I mean, I actually hear things like this. So don't be on extreme ends of the risk spectrum. If you save and do not invest properly, I'll tell you what happens. So if you're in, let's say, putting 1 lakh in a bank FD for 30 years, that will become about 75 lakhs at the end of 30 years. If you are putting in something which is multi-asset, giving you maybe 9.5%, you will end up with 1.7 crores. If it's little more skewed towards equity, 12.5% compounding over 30 years, you will end up with 3 crores. So it's a 4-time difference, 75 lakhs versus 3 crores. So, and equity in India has given 14-15% compounded over 40 odd years. But of course, there's huge variation. So let me not, so even like a whole decade, 2010 to 20, the compounding was less than 9%. So it was only around fixed deposit compounding. But then because it was so lagging that 2020 onwards, the market has gone up dramatically. So equity returns are lumpy. Sometimes वो 5 साल का return 2 साल में आ जाएगा और vice versa. I mean 94 to 2003, 9 years the Sensex net return was zero. I mean it went up and it went down and ended up where it was. But after that in about 5 years, less than 5 years, the market went up 6 times. So that's the nature of equity market. So but again, you can just buy the category, buy a good quality flexi cap type of or multi-cap mutual fund, rather than say that until I understand the equity markets enough to find the last multi-bagger, I will not start investing. So, and also in equity, yes, one more thing. People ask me that where is the froth in the market? And I say the easiest thumb rule to find that out is to find out where the mutual funds are launching new thematic funds, new fund offerings जो आती है ना, small cap, defense stock, PSU stocks. Those are the things you have to steer clear of, because almost always those themes will come when that theme is close to the peak. This is the data over 25 years. If you look at when a technology fund is launched, when a pharma fund is launched, when a small cap fund is launched, it is almost always close to the theme, peak of the theme. And why do the mutual funds launch that at that time? Not that they don't know it. They know it, but that's the easiest time for them to get the assets and therefore make greater fees, because their welfare is in maximizing the fees. And it is when everybody on the street comes to know about the theme कि मेरे friend ने बोला अरे defense stocks में मैंने पैसा बनाया, तो then there's this FOMO feeling, and that's when you invest. I mean, this is an example I'd given on TV, and this the lady who told me was laughing. You talked about me. So this was a doctor, and she told me I've never invested in equity. I mean, this is a few months ago. And not even an equity mutual fund. And then she told me that should I invest in defense stocks? I said, when the story has come to you, who's never even invested in equity, you can rest assured the story is over. so always be careful, always that, unfortunately, there's a lot of mis-selling in the financial markets. So you have to be careful. You cannot always rely that the so-called professional advising you is giving you the right advice, even if they come from a big name thing. You know, I started my career with Citibank, so I know what, and my major business was dealing with foreign institutional investors. So just because they come from a so-called big reputed name doesn't mean that the advice they are giving you is right. There's been so much data on how much money the banks make by advising on insurance products and things like that, which may be totally inappropriate for the customer. I have heard of retirees going to the bank with their PF and ending up buying an insurance product with no proper advice, because everyone, unfortunately, is in the business of maximizing their own profits for the most part, which unfortunately now has become the true of the health business also, that where you can't even rely on your doctor's advice on whether you or not you need surgery. So the similar thing, so at least that's why I'm saying at least have the basic literacy. I mean, somebody who had the basic literacy and be able to calculate an IRR on a ULIP would have known that it made no sense, because so much of your first year premium was just paying the agent's fee. But when they only give you upar se ki, this is the return and all that, and you yourself can't calculate it, then that's a problem. So at least have basic literacy. Now very easy to get through books, videos. Now even university courses are free online. So at least basic, and then do the broad allocation. Don't be on extreme end of the risk spectrum. Just do these things, and you are, and also, if you are not a skilled professional, number one, and anyway you don't have 100% of your time to devote to this, don't try to manage your entire stock portfolio yourself, because you will not be the best fund manager there is. If you want to use it for entertainment, कि cocktail party में थोड़ा बात करने लायक रहे, तो उतना, then you keep your 10-15% for as play money and do it with that. But that should not be the bulk of your stock portfolio for most people. I would, as I said, because all of you are doing something else in your day job.
Lovely, lovely to hear that. And some of these sort of resonate very closely to me also. You know, I don't know how all of you do investment. I do a lot of it basis what the family member is telling or my friend is telling, right? And all of them will tell you that you should have invested in MRF stock. You know, you would have made millions and millions of money. Or they would have said you missed on Tesla and Apple stock, right? So I can really associate with that, because if it's come to this level, then it's mainstream, right? There's no differentiation left anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Tesla and Apple, so this is also an example I sometimes give, that people say that, oh, if you had an opportunity to invest in Tesla or Apple, you know, you would have been a fool not to invest. But again, look at the data. For one, Apple, Tesla, and many of these famous names came close to bankruptcy multiple times. So investing, just as life, is a game of probability. It is not a game where you know the outcome for certain, which means a reasonable percentage of decisions you make will turn out to be mistakes. So Tesla came to close to bankruptcy multiple times, and after listing for 8-9 years, it gave no returns. And then suddenly it zoomed, so suddenly, you know, CAGR looks very good, the compounded. And Apple, for 17 years after its IPO, it had given zero returns, zero. And again, the story in people's mind is that Steve Jobs came back to Apple and he turned it around and it was great thereafter. But again, the data, not 1 year, not 2 years, 7 years after Steve Jobs came back, Apple did nothing. You know, 1 year it would make a marginal profit, 1 year it would make a marginal loss. And then they had this one hit product, iPod, and then it took off. So many times, you know, the impression we have, and you are in manufacturing, you would have seen it that, you know, कभी भी trajectory इतनी smooth नहीं होती है, जो बाद में होता है कि अरे successful company means that everything was great all the time. No, always things are ups and downs. 20 years later, it, in your mind, in the general janta's mind rather, it is all looks very, very smooth, but it's never that smooth. Whether you read the story of Amazon or Nike, or here in India, you have fewer people who have written about the business trajectories, but whoever he has, like Subhash Chandra of Z, his autobiography is very interesting because it is very forthright. And so, again, if, all of you are in business, I don't need to tell you that when you read the histories of businesses, it is both more interesting and never as smooth as the general impression is.
Well, lovely. And maybe I'll close with this one last question to you and open it to the audience also. I'm sure all of you will have a lot of personal finances questions. Maybe you can take this opportunity to get everything cleared with Devina as well. But Devina, you spoke about Warren Buffett, who's considered like the father of investing and all. But there were a lot of myths that you said, you know, they are conventional wisdom that probably needs to be busted now. So very itching to know some of those as well.
Yeah, so I mean, people ask me about should I follow famous investors. So again, look at the data. So I mean, Warren Buffett, not because he's the worst example or anything like that, but it's just that he's the best known. So that's why I've taken that example, that people think that he buys and holds. But what is the data? That he sells 50% of what he buys within 6 months and 85% within 2 years. So this is just a myth that he buys and holds. People think again he buys these cash generating consumer brands, but again, you know, his biggest holding at one point, even now, I mean, at one point it was 50% was Apple. Did not fit into that thing. He's made a lot of money out of structured product, derivative. So the whole point is that a lot of times, you don't even know what whatever your impression again is, just as in the case of businesses, so also in the case of investors, is that they are that what they're doing is not exactly what they're doing. Many times their results are not as good as what do you think they are. Warren Buffett for the last 20 years has been about the same as the S&P, slightly lagging most of the time. Ray Dalio, again well-known name, has been a huge laggard. But there's even more fundamental question, that even if, let us say that XYZ is the richest investor in this, and therefore should I follow what he or she did? Now, if you follow a very high risk strategy, let us say there's a high risk strategy where 90% at the end of 1 year, 90% of the people go bankrupt, and the 10% make their money 10 times. You play this game 5 times. At the end of it, there'll be 1% left who would have made 10 to the power of 5, but 99% of the people would have gone out of business. Now, if you say that this person started with 100 rupees and he's made X crores, now this is the person I have to follow, it might be the worst strategy to follow. Again, this is survivorship, that you're only looking at the survivor. The question is not that what is the strategy followed by the most successful investor. The question is that of all the people who followed this strategy, what happened to them? So, that's the right question to ask. So you have to frame the question correctly. I mean, that's one of the longer chapters in my book. So I'm just talking you through the 2 or 3 points. But this is the thing. So always be clear about what you are asking and whether that's going to take you to nirvana.
Yeah, that applies to the today's world also, which is really dependent on all the co-pilots and chat GPTs. Asking the right question is very important. Otherwise, you'll get garbage out of that. So maybe I'll request the audience, if you have any questions, any of your, maybe some of the thoughts that she spoke about that triggers your own or questions your own investment, approach. Yes.
I trust you've all downloaded the app to put your questions in. I've been requesting you repeatedly.
Yeah,
Please do that.
Give the mic to the ma'am sitting in the front.
Right here.
Yeah.
Right here. I'll give it to her.
Very interesting conversation, and congratulations on the book. I just have a question, since I'm dealing with the subject of women. Have you seen the risk-taking ability of a woman investor to be any different that of a male from your experience?
So women in investing, of course, that is one of the causes, I should say, for me, that women, even professional women, do not take charge of their finances. They leave it to the men in the house. And I mean, there are a few reasons why even high-ranking professionals do not manage their own money. One, of course, as I say, that even if the man in your life acts confident, that doesn't mean that they know the markets, because in any walk in life, and this is something I learned through recruitment errors, is that confidence does not equal competence. In terms of risk taking, yes, I mean, not so much. I mean, it is that women are good at saving, but again, they are probably not optimizing their investment. So I talked of that risk spectrum, so they are more likely to be on the 2 lower risk spectrum. And there are 2 or 3 other things relating to this. One is that they think that they don't know enough. As I said, that is the other thing is that too many things on their plate. So if you're a professional woman, you're still managing the house, managing the mother-in-law's medication and the child's schedule and the grocery list and all that. And they think this is one thing the husband is happy to take care of, so let them take care of it, which is the wrong thinking. And on terms of the other thing is that if you invest in a risk asset like equity, it is guaranteed, it is not an if. You will make a loss sometime or the other. Now, when a woman makes a loss, her own thinking as well as the family will tell her, "Arey, tum to bewakoof thi, you didn't know enough, why did you do this?" Whereas if a husband makes a loss, very often the wife will not even bring it up, that why, spoil the peace in the home. So that's how differently they are treated. So this is also part of the reason why this happened. I mean, the whole socialization of women is very different, and at all levels investing. In the last 2 years itself, at least 3 young women interviewers would have asked me that how do I choose a profession where I can manage career along with home and all that. And it breaks my heart because no man has ever asked me that. Nobody has asked Sachin Tendulkar that you played for 24 years, how guilty did you feel about abandoning your children for months at a stretch? That's the truth of the matter. Nobody asked Elon Musk that how do you manage 4 companies and 11 children? And look at the questions that are asked to women. So, I mean, we have a long way to go.
Any others from the audience? Yes.
Thank you for giving us valuable insight, especially for a person like us who are from non-finance background. Thank you. My question is that normally what I have researched on the social media, you can say, normally it is said that people who doesn't know much about equity, they should invest in the index fund. Okay. So I have personally invested in the index fund, some in large cap and Nifty Next 50. But to my surprise, they are not doing good enough in last 1 year. What could be the probable reasons and what should be our strategy going forward?
Yeah, I mean, see, if you're not investing at all, the index fund might be better than nothing, there's no doubt. And also, I mean, my own thinking is that the place where the maximum value addition happens in an active versus a passive strategy. Passive strategy means index funds, just to be clear. So active is some fund manager is actively managing, is in risk management. So when the market falls 30%, your index fund will fall 30% or even more maybe, because index fund doesn't exactly replicate the index, there's some error. But the value addition is in risk management, and that is because investing is a loser's game. And all of you can, because this is not a concept that is particular to investing. So there is if you Google, there is an article called The Loser's Game, 1970s article. And it's an eye-opening article. It's only 4 or 5 pages. But that everything in the world is either a winner's game or a loser's game. So, and games change. So for example, aviation, at the time that, I mean, it's a bad example in yesterday's context, but yes, I mean, that's the fact that aviation in JRD Tata's time was an adventure sport. It was a winner's game. If you read the account of his Karachi-London flight, he went off course, he had to land at some disused airstrip in another town altogether. Somewhere the one part didn't work, so he wound a wire into something and used that. And then, but now there's only one way to fly the aircraft. Go by the checklist, make no mistakes. So investing maybe in our grandparents' time was a winner's game. When data was not freely available, even getting the annual report of an Indian company used to be a task, even in the 90s. And then so you can find out gems which nobody had heard of. There was definitely no Excel sheet around. But now, what is it? Data is freely available to everybody. Even a company cannot give differential information even to an analyst. So analyst meet transcript also have to be there on the website. So now the skill has moved. So it is no longer that you will find consistently gems that nobody else has found. So now your focus, number one, has to be not to lose. So not to lose doesn't mean that you won't make any losses on any stock. In fact, the trick to not lose big money is to ensure you have a stop loss, and therefore you don't lose big money on a single stock by booking the small losses. So that's why the focus, even when a fund manager talks to you about what they do, everyone has great stories, very attractive stories about how they pick stocks. Quiz them about risk management and when do you sell, and you will find that the depth is missing there for most people. But the real value addition comes from that side, from risk management and knowing when to sell. When to buy ka, to everybody has very rosy stories, and that's something again to guard against. You spoke about stories versus data, so that's the part to guard against. Sometimes even, and this I'm talking large banks even would ask me that what are your high conviction ideas? And I wrote a 3-page note to them saying why I do not have high conviction ideas. The high conviction kya hai? Ki you bought into a story. You believe that narrative. That's what I'm guarding against, because once you have got married to a story, you got married to a stock, you will not find it easy to exit. You always have to be skeptical and see whether the data is right or not. But this winner's game and loser's game is like a mind-opening concept. Like at tennis at the Grand Slam level is a winner's game. You have to play brilliantly to win. Tennis at your local mohalla level is a loser's game. You have to play not to lose. Just keep the ball in play, and the other guy in trying to win will make enough mistakes for you to win.
Wonderful. We have one question which says, what is the ideal investment return we should expect?
Depends on what your risk, as I said, this is about asset allocation. So asset allocation means what, how much are you putting in equity, which is a function of many things, including how many responsibilities you have. So like if a 25-year-old asks me that, are you like responsible only for yourself? Or are you have to look after your parents also? What do you plan to do? You plan to study after some time? So you have to, again, now there are enough things on the net also where you can do that. I will need X amount of money for my children's education. I'll need, this is my monthly expense. So how much should I budget for retirement? So do that exercise. And also then, no, we can only look at past data. As I said, the equity in India has given 14-15% compounding. Will it give exactly that? No. So, maybe you budget for 12 and a half. One thing which I have forgotten in this entire thing, which is also equally important, which is that we think of investing or asset allocation only from the India perspective. Most Indians invest only in India. But India is not the world. India is less than 5% of the market cap of the world. So there's no reason why 90 or 100% of your investment should be in India. That's so important. One statistic I give is that when I started working, the dollar was 12 rupees. The course of less than a career, there's been a 90% depreciation. So when you're talking of your goals, which are 20 years hence, 30 years hence, there's no way you can forget that. And this came home to me about more than 25 years ago. There was something called an Asian crisis. So and this happened in not countries which were doing badly, but which were supposed to be the best countries in the world in terms of growth, the Asian tigers. And then in 1 year, in 98, this was 97, 98, in 1 year, all those markets fell between 50% and 90%. 50% for Taiwan, 90% for Indonesia, Thailand, South Korea, Philippines, all between 50 and 90. And that was a wake-up call for me. I said, this is the danger of putting all your eggs in one basket. And that is when the year after that, we went global. So we were not just the first Indian, but we were the first Asian members of the London Stock Exchange in 1999. Other than the Japanese, nobody had gone west. And next year of the NASD. So that was a wake-up call for me that you cannot be in only. And Indonesia is a place where I'd spent 6 months in my Citibank days. And I said, Aaj Indonesia mein hote, so 90% net worth was gone. So this is the thing that over a period of time, at least 30-40% of your corpus should be global. And global doesn't mean only the US. This is the other myth. People think US ka ek NASDAQ ya S&P fund le liya to ho gaya. So again, like the woman's cause, this is also a cause for me. So we have a product that starts at $10,000, just 8.5 lakh rupees for exposure across the globe, all assets, all countries. Normally you would not get it for less than $1 million. But as I said, this is a cause that Indians do not invest. And this is a hangover from our past when we could not invest overseas. I see people who are, some of you might remember, but I think some of you will not know this, that well after I started working, many years after that, all you could take outside India, if you were going to London or New York or wherever, was $500 once in 3 years. And if you were going more than once in 3 years, you could take only $20 each time. So there was you could not invest overseas. So that way our grandmothers were not wrong in buying gold. Because gold at that time was the only effective overseas investment, because that was the only dollarized asset you could buy. And that is why, while the dollar graph of gold is actually more volatile than equities, like the 1980 price of gold was not breached till 2007, 27 years in between. Even 19 years later, it was down 62% in dollar terms. But rupee mein gold ka chart theek lagta hai, because it is essentially a rupee depreciation chart. So hamari dadi nani usme galat nahi thi. But now gold is not the only dollarized asset you have. Now you should look at global investments, and over time actually the global, more of people's expenses have got dollarized or into hard currency, because now many more children go overseas When we were growing up, that was not an option that you ever thought of, that anybody would go for the undergraduate degree overseas. And people's children settled down. So many people say after retirement, 6 mahina udhar, 6 mahina idhar karenge. So basically dollar expenses are going up, and dollar or hard currency expenses. So I mean, this is also one essential part which glad I remembered. So.
Yeah, there's one more question, and it's called the Zoho Backstage. I just realized why it is called Backstage, because it's at the back. But according to you, what should be the percentage in gold, real estate, equity, and fixed returns?
So this depends again on the stage of life and when you will need the money. So it's not, I would say, maximum when you are very young should be maybe 2/3 in equity. And real estate, I am not a votary of real estate as investment. Yes, you might need one home where the consideration is not purely financial consideration, that you want to be in a stable place. If you know you're going to be in that town or city, and your children's education and all of those things. But other than that, the problem with real estate is that it is extremely illiquid. And all the aggregate data, there is real estate index for the country, shows that it has not given great returns at all. So there's only those anecdotal evidence that my uncle had this place in this land in Gurgaon, or this land in Greater Noida, or wherever, and that multiplied like this.